Hello everybody, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel, and a momentous day, a day that's been far too long in coming. I am delighted to say that we have Paul Machin on the James Lawrence Allcott channel. It's been far too long. I realised when you were sort of tweeting about this, it was ages ago, and the Euros happened, I calmed down with Dream Teams for a second, and I was like, oh my God, Paul's not been on the channel yet. Like, we need to sort this out. So I've been waiting to get to this part of the season. I'm excited to go through your team, and I saw your team because I thought, okay, guaranteed, this is 1 to 11 Liverpool. It's not 1 to 11 Liverpool.
No, it's not. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure whether I'm entirely comfortable that it's not 1 to 11 Liverpool. And not
that's why I'm asking.
But I have made my life out of that. You know, I spent a decade, 11 years or whatever, covering Liverpool forensically. But I also, you know, have heroes outside of Merseyside. So yeah, I've tried to hybrid it, but it was tough not to just pick 18-19 to 20-20 Liverpool.
Yeah.
Because literally they've had all the best players and done
True.
all the best things.
Well, yeah, as I said to you, and as everyone should know, when it comes to dream teams, it's the players that kind of matter to you. So it doesn't need to be just Liverpool, but we understand that it's going to be a lot of Liverpool players, and it wouldn't feel genuine if it was. Before I get into it, make sure you check out Redmen TV. If you haven't, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, make sure you do. Best Liverpool channel out there by a mile. And if you haven't checked out any of the other episodes of the Dream Team series, we've got Ben Foster, Emmanuel Petit, Goldbridge, Rory, Sharky. I've probably missed someone. Loads of people on it. So go check out the other episodes of Dream Teams. Neda Manua, that was it. Right, let's get into it then, Paul. First up, I have teased it a little bit, but Neville Southall was a strange pick for your goalkeeper. Talk us through it.
You know what, Jen? You know, I could have picked Nev. Genuinely could have picked Nev. I definitely didn't, but
Yes.
I very much could have picked Neville Southall. Apart from the fact that he's one of the greatest human beings going. Like, just on this, I nearly picked Bruce Grobbelaar because he was my first goalkeeping idol as a goalkeeper. He was the first one. He was Liverpool's goalie when I was growing up, and he was amazing. And my dad used to show me all the FA Cup finals from the 80s. We had every Liverpool Cup final on video in like a load of shelves under the stairs, so you could go and pick one out.
Nice.
and waste an afternoon. And obviously Neville Southall was Everton's goalie at that time, so of course it was like, oh, Neville Southall's a big man, and we used to like, he was like junior school taunts. I went to one of his soccer schools and he was great, Southall, and then I've met him recently because he's been doing he does some stuff for Toffee TV, and he's obviously like this supreme socialist, like crusader for like human rights and all these kind of stuff. And Bruce Grobbelaar is an amazing guy. I'm going on tour with him to Canada in a few weeks' time.
What an amazing sentence.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going on tour with Bruce actually in a bit. Bruce Springsteen? No, Grobbelaar.
Yeah, but Nev is like, in having spent time with both of them, like Neville Southall is just probably one of the best human beings on the planet. But we digress.
Yes.
Neville Southall, Everton goalie, good.
Yes.
I went Jose Luis Chilavert, which is a very niche reference. To some, probably better known to people in the 30s and upwards. Certainly won't be known outside of the country of Paraguay to anyone else, really.
Well, incredibly, you're not the first person to pick Chilavert in this series.
Really?
I think it was Rory picked him as well.
Wow.
So I was kind of surprised with him at the time. So we have spoken about Chilavert before. I'm always intrigued to know if your 4 stats on him are the same as my 4 stats on him. But yeah, go for it.
For me, again, as a goalie growing up, just that dream of, you don't get to have decisive moments. You know, you do, because you can make a save in the last minute and win a football match, but let's be honest, that's boring. What you want to do is have a free kick in the 94th minute, and you want to bend it in, and you want to score, and you want to, moreover than this, is have your own kit. Like, he used to wear this kit, whether he was playing for Villette Sarsfield or whether he was playing for Paraguay, and had like a big, like, tiger or lion on the front of it or whatever. It was mad.
Yeah. What was that specific to him? That was kind of bespoke to him.
Yeah, because I only know this because, of course, this is the 90s when you didn't have the internet. So it was the Nick Hancock's Football Nightmares video, and it had a collection of his best moments on, and that was where I fell in love with him. A free kick scoring goalie. What's not to love? That's
really interesting because what I always want to dive into is kind of like the strategy behind like some of these picks. So two things I think I would imagine will be a theme in this, and I didn't realise this first one, but one I do want to find out about, and this isn't one of those, but I think you've met a lot of these people. So I'm intrigued to know your thoughts on what it was like when you met these people, which is because that's not always the case for a lot of, football fans, right? The second thing is how integral your VHS collection seems to be within this. And that is something that people that are younger will not understand. Like, people remember, or people of a certain age, I do, you remember your first tape. Now, my first tape was 92-93 season review, and you just watch it on repeat because there's nothing else to watch and you're into football, and there's not, you can't go and watch every division all the time. So Nick Hancock is such a great reference because that's like, Nick Hancock was again, for those people who don't remember, he was like, so there's like a show called League of Their Own now on Sky One. There was a similar thing called They Think It's All Over in the 90s, and he was the main guy from that, and he was a Stoke City fan, and he made videos with like gaffs and stuff, and Shilliver was on there. Wow, I haven't heard Nick Hancock for a long time.
He did Room 101 as well for the longest time. Obviously, Frank Skinner's had that for years now, but he was the host of that for the. But yeah, well, it was great because there was him and Danny Baker, who was, of course, is about another very 90s football reference, even though he's still going. But like, yeah, he would do these gaff videos every Christmas. It was like a staple. Great young boy into football Christmas present. And you've obviously been in the old retro football TV studio up in Liverpool, and like I've got walls filled with these random. I mean, they don't really make them anymore, but like Danny Dyer's done them, and Piers Morgan's done them, and all kinds now. But no,
but obviously that explains the pick though, because you then you have these. Because, before that, it would have been people would have seen, it's the World Cup, obviously, but then it's like reading annuals or stuff like that. But so for you see this goalkeeper scoring goals, and it's just like, it's pretty mesmeric. So, yeah, okay, I understand the choice now. Because, this is the thing with Dream Teams as well. Often I'm after players that you pick, I go, why? But I could see what that might have been. But yeah, okay, it was. Well, congratulations to Nick Hancock. So, in terms of your formation. This was the formation I expected as well. It's Liverpool now, isn't it? The 4-3-3, right? Give us your left back.
Left back, I've gone with, and this is where it's Liverpool's current team minus 102. I've gone Andy Robertson at left back. Now, there was a temptation. As we form the team, you'll see there's a little bit of like a 90s worldie, 90s and early 90s worldies. This is thrown in for good measure. So I nearly went Roberto Carlos just for a laugh, and that would have been largely down to like ISS Pro 98 on the PS1, where you'd play him left wing because you might as well, because he was dead fast and he could kick the ball really hard. But no, I went with Robbo because from a Liverpool perspective, we've not had a left back as good as him in the time that I've been following football. Really, there's been
who are the other nominees? Is there anyone that's anywhere near close? Not really.
People would go. I think people have got a real soft spot for John Arisa, but he also scored an own goal in the Champions League against Chelsea, which effectively knocked us out. It was only the first leg, and he really fell off a cliff toward the end of his Liverpool career. So I harbour a lot of like less than stellar feelings towards him because of how it kind of ended. But he was up there certainly for a little while. He was around that Champions League winning team as well. So there's that.
And release the Kraken, of course, with John Harris.
But the left back thing's mad. Like there's been a shortage, and I nearly went Maldini, just for pure hipster style points. But no, I went with Robert because I've genuinely not loved the left back. Like there's no left backs where I've gone, oh God, I'd love to go for a pint with him, or I would do it, or I just admire so much everything about his character. And I've been lucky enough to interview him a couple of times, and he's just such a he's just funny and he's just humble and he's dead nice and he plays with his heart on his sleeve. And there's something really something great about seeing a player like that, particularly for your own team. Those are the players that stand out. Now, I've idolised players who've just had that, but he's got that, but he's probably like the best left back in the world as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be kind of rubber stamped. It feels like the sort of best left back. And I wonder if that's because he's very British. Do you know what I mean? But he's very Liverpool. You know, you're buying a player from Hull City, he comes here and then he becomes one of the best players in the world. Like that is, that's something that you guys did for decades. So for him to come and do it, it's kind of a bit of a throwback in that sense. I also like about Andy Robertson is the fact that, and again, I think, it's a sort of Britishness about, there's a nastiness there. There is, he's good on the wind up, isn't he? He's ready to go, but he's generally in control with it, isn't he? Which is nice to have in your team.
Yeah, definitely. There's a great instance against Roma in the Champions League semi-finals in 17-18 where he lashes one of their players off the pitch and and he smacks Messi on the head.
Yeah, he smacks
Barcelona when he's on the floor. It's just little bits of. Again, you're right. Players who love a bit of needle and they genuinely, because there's some players who love needle and then they get it back and then they lose their heads, which I don't like. Whereas when someone gives it back, he smiles. Like, oh great, I'm up for this challenge.
Yeah. Let's go.
Likeable, yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine, obviously it's not, the hatred's not there for me because he's Scottish and it's Liverpool, so I'm not bothered. But I can imagine Chelsea fans or Everton fans just hating him in that 90 minutes, and it's something almost like the pit of your stomach, like, yeah, go on, Robbo, wind them up. Nothing like that feeling. It's lovely. Right, right back. You've gone with Robertson on one side, a player who's, I guess, my question with this player, of course, you're going to reveal it in a second, is the circus around him. I'd love to know your thoughts on the circus around him because he's firing again now. He had sort of like a 3-week blip, but there is a real circus around this next pick that you've gone for. Let's know who it is.
Yeah, the backfilling circus around Trent Alexander-Arnold. Don't get it. Do not get it at all. And I think actually no. The only way I can sort of figure this out is that because there's about 12 English right backs at the moment, and everyone thinks they've got a good one, and some have more than others. Like I think Reece James is terrific. I didn't understand Southgate's decision to go with him until I watched the Euros, and I went, okay, yeah, fine. I didn't see him and go, oh my God, definitely, he's clearly streets ahead of Trent Alexander-Arnold, because he's not. But I understood for what I got what he was trying to do at that tournament, and Reece James made sense in that regard. So that was absolutely fine. But you've got even like the Wan-Bissaka thing. You got a lot of Manchester United fans, a lot of vocal Manchester United fans as well, and there was that whole like step outside thing for a little while of like every time Wan-Bissaka would, I don't know what he does, slide tackle someone probably, and then it'd be like, oh, Trent, step outside, and and then did Liverpool play on the Sunday and Trent would get a hat trick of assists, and he'd be like, no, you're all right, I'm fine here. He's the best right back on the planet, and I think that's. It's normally, I think there's like a thing of you're talking top 5. When you say best in the world, you're generally talking top 5 or so. So like I think Mo Salah's absolutely world class. He's probably our best player, and yet he's probably realistically he's top 5, maybe top 3 in his position in the world because Messi still plays and that kind of thing. I think one of my other players we'll come to in centre half is undoubtedly the best player on the planet in his position, but Trent is for me. He's 22 years old. James, he scored a free kick in a Champions League qualifying game against Hoffenheim away in Heidelberg in the start of the 17-18. So Liverpool haven't been in the Champions League for years, and this Scouse kid playing fullback. We thought he was okay. Certainly promising. Great to have a local lad in there, and he scored a free kick, and you just go, blimey, like it's one thing to come in and hold your own, but like fullbacks don't do that to have that as a string to your bow as well. He's supremely talented.
I think in that moment as well, it's like they were like, "Here, Trent, you have the ball." Like, I think that's it as much as anything, right? It's the fact that you got this kid who's coming through, and you go, "Okay, well, we've got all these stars around him." And he's the guy taking it, and then he does what he does, and you go, "Oh, okay, I get it." Going back to the Wan-Bissaka thing, this is called dream teams, and I did think about it there. It was like, if people want to have the debate about Wan-Bissaka and Trent Alexander-Arnold, fine. But what I will say is that of this generation of fans or people that have seen him, how many of the Man United fans are going to put Wan-Bissaka anywhere near their dream team? How many picks are they going to get? And how many of the current sort of, say like, I don't know, 13 to 18-year-olds that have been watching the last 5 years are going to be putting Trent in their team? Like, some of the passes, the highlight reel that is there with him is pretty outrageous for a player who's so young still. And the fact that he's a local lad is just it's gorgeous for you guys as well, isn't it? To kind of have him there for you, because you don't have to truly worry about him leaving, do you?
I can't imagine so. I mean, look, maybe years down the line he might just fancy doing something else. Who knows? But again, he's 22. He's got Jurgen Klopp for another couple of years at least. It's he's great, James. This is the thing about fullbacks. There are a lot of 6 and 7 out of 10 fullbacks in our lives. And for years, it's true. Liverpool had a string of between 6 and 7 out of 10 rated fullbacks from the mid noughties, particularly onwards, where we had this like conveyor belt where we had like Hossamy, then we upgraded him for Kronkamp, and then we upgraded him for Arbeloa, who was good, but he was never more than a 7 out of 10. Yeah, and Nathaniel Klein came in, and that's the thing about like Wan-Bissaka for me. He's Klein. And that Daniel Klein's mad because he had a really bad back injury and he's never been the same since. But he was England's right back, and he was a very, very good right back, very good fullback. Good defensive fullback, not great crossing the halfway line, but that's what people expect. I still go to Anfield. You still occasionally get one going, "Oh, Trent, a right back's got to defend." Why?
Yeah. Well, that's it. Because it's what's said in that he's a match winner. He's a match winner. And that is so rare for a fullback. You're right. It's it's a place where you stick players that are solid for you that aren't going to let you down. And I guess with that and what he can offer, there's going to be moments where you get caught the other way, right?
But it's a myth that he can't. It's a myth that he can't defend, and I think it's a very lazy analysis of it because when you play so high up the pitch, it's not your job to be in a flat line of a back four. He's not Gary Neville. This is not those days anymore. He effectively plays right midfield for us, and you would never have. No one would have blamed David Beckham if Gary Neville got overloaded down that side. It's just the way that Liverpool play. I get it. It's the same with the Robertson thing. It's tough when they then go to international duty because they're going to worse teams who don't play as expansively or don't have the players around them to enable them to do that. So Robertson doesn't play as well for Scotland because his type of left back isn't probably what Scotland needs. And the same is true with Trent at right back, but good. Let them retire from international football. Remove themselves from the media circus into the warm, comforting bosom of Liverpool. And play for us for even longer. That'd be great.
Sure. And one thing I'll say with the defensive thing is that I think also the centre-backs you have around you is important. And last year, because the thing I think Real Madrid away, and I think that they went, Tony Cruz went, right, let's hit this channel, which one is a positional thing. But again, is like, I think it's a spotlight thing. Like everyone's retweeting everything. Like nothing gets like hidden or not, you talk about everything in its minutiae. So that's where these kind of like strands of argument are going to kind of reveal themselves. But like, he's gorgeous. He's absolutely gorgeous. Centre backs. So let's go with you were talking about best right backs in the world and hinted at a centre back. Let's talk about that centre back first, which again I don't think is a surprise for anyone.
Shock. It's Virgil van Dijk. Look, he's just like. He might be the best footballer on the planet. He just might be. Now, I know we draw all our eyes.
We'll never know because he's playing centre-back. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. But we draw all our eyes towards the forward players. And obviously, because I just think it's funny how, you have to play in the front 3 or 4 positions to be classed as the best player on the planet. Whereas, like, Virgil van Dijk is so much better than anyone else at his job. Like, there are other good centre-halves, like really good, really, really good ones. But in fairness, there's been an absolute dearth of quality centre-halves in the professional game for the last decade, maybe slightly less. But you can name not the best defenders. Yeah. And there's not loads, and you know, and even a lot of them. You find this with goalkeepers a little bit. You start to name players who you know the name of, but then it's like I'm sure there might be people who accidentally reel off Matt Hummels when he's years past being in his prime. You know, people still clapping like, you know, idiots over Sergio Ramos like he's the greatest thing to you know, he's 35, 36, I think years old at this point. Brilliant, but he's, you know, again, people are still lauding him as being absolutely the best of the best, when again, you know, that kind of tells you how the competition's been lacking, but also just for me, Virgil's just so much better. There's nothing, he's fast, but you'd never know it because he never needs to run ever.
Yeah,
he with everything in the air, he can pass the ball to anywhere on the pitch, inch perfect.
Have you really noticed that difference with him being back in the team?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it's one of those tactical things that again doesn't get picked up on, because everyone looked at Nat Phillips and Reece Williams and saying, we'll look to doing good defending things because that's what we recognise. He's good at heading and tackling and kicking. Virgil, you're under pressure. He picks the ball up. He opens his body up and he sends you on your way 65, 70 yards down the pitch, and you're in 3 seconds later before the other team's had a time to reset. And that's, for other defenders, that's hit and hope. But again, it's just wonderfully, perfectly measured. He's just, he's levels above anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, again, all these, especially defensive positions, all of them really, they sort of change over time. And the centre-back position is like, it's a really weird pressure point. Whereas back in the day, it was like, the ball's going to be flown this way, win your header. It doesn't matter really where it goes, as long as it's away from the goal and you're an unbelievable centre-back. Whereas now, you have to be able to hit these, you know, pinging passes. And again, if you don't make those passes, people are going, what's wrong with you? So there's not much kind of to be gained in a lot of that. And defensively, you haven't got 2 fullbacks next to you. You've got 2 fullbacks the other end of the pitch. So you've got to be really, really elite in what you're doing. And I think it's what's interesting with some of these players, you know, we've gone back to back now with 3 players who are currently in the side. Is it difficult to be aware of how good they are right now? Because I always think there's both, right? There's in the sort of heat of it, I find that certain players you go, oh, you're in the stand, you're watching the game and you go, that was a moment, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a moment. Oh, and he's not going to be here forever, is he? No, he's not, is he? You have those kind of little moments, but at the same time, I don't think they ever can kind of totally crystallise until that player's gone, if you know what I mean. Same with, like, you know, people passing away and things like that. I know it sounds a bit morbid, but yeah, so knowing you've got all these amazing players and such a like iconic squad, does that, like, I don't know, how does that make you feel about these players playing right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, the good thing is that I've enough bank of experience of players I thought were really good, and now I'm comparing them to the ones that we've got. Like, I nearly put Sami Hyypiä, instinctively I put Sami Hyypiä down, and then I was like, it's Virgil van Dijk. It just is. You know, he's just better. You know, he was really good. But like, that's the thing about this. We have this with positions of we now, because I could say something like that would probably boil a degree of piss around, you know, when you say, like, think of the great the centre halves that people accept as being the best centre halves. So you could go like, Rio Ferdinand is probably one of the ones where there's still be a real strong debate because he's not too far removed from playing. But like the Tony Adamses and the Keowns and even the Sol Campbells and stuff of whom we go, oh yeah, well they're definitely better than Virgil van Dijk because blah blah blah. They're not because what was, to your point, what was required of you 20 years ago as a centre half is completely different, and Virgil is able to do all of that, but is able to do all the football playing things as well. Yeah. And yeah, I think sometimes, to your point, I think we get a bit lost in our own teams sometimes. And Liverpool have got this major problem where when there's always got to be a worse player in your side, which is where it normally stands out. So we've all got like a space in our lives to discuss the worst player in our team at all times. But when you become better, that worst player gets better as well. Like the rising tide floats all boats. Right. So you all of a sudden you find yourself being really upset with Divock Origi, who is scored a winning goal in a Champions League final, kind of player. Virgil's probably the one really exception, I think, that he's just. Because I think Salah's loved and beloved around the globe, but I think it'll take him moving on to be truly, cast in bronze as this god of football that he was for us. Whereas I think Virgil's the one exception. I think he cuts across all of that. He's so good that it's almost. You don't even talk about it anymore. It's just accepted.
Yeah, totally. So plain to see. It's amazing, isn't it? And again, another player, you didn't get him from Real Madrid. You got him from Southampton. It's fascinating to see that. I think that's what I get a bit frustrated with players. People kind of sometimes think that, well, because a player is playing for a certain club, that they cannot be, the level that level. I think, again, is another great example of a player who can, as soon as he stepped into that team. It wasn't sort of... it didn't take him 8 months to kind of acclimatise to Liverpool. It was straight away, wasn't it? He was elite.
Scored on his debut against Everton in the FA Cup. You're going to announce yourself.
that'll help, won't it? Your other centre back, someone who you've spent a lot of time with since he stopped playing, Jamie Carragher as your second centre back. So I'll give you my general synopsis of Jamie Carragher. Istanbul elite, right? But. There are people that are good at good footballers, and then there are people. I'm saying this wrong, Henning. There's people who are good at football, and there are people that are good footballers. That's it. He's good at football, but he's not a good footballer. Do you know what I mean? He didn't look right. He never looked right.
I have to be very careful with this. I do. I have a good working relationship with Jamie Carragher, shall we say? But no, I adored him because it was that thing I mentioned earlier about the player who wears his heart on his sleeve. Yeah. And there was a great story around Carragher as well about he was just a little bit of a tearaway as a youth, and he was getting in trouble for stuff. There was it's a half remembered point now, but a bit of trouble on a Christmas staff night out or whatever, when he got into a bit of bother, and it was a bit like he's not so good that he can get away with this. Robbie Fowler could get away with stuff, and McManaman and Redknapp could probably get away with stuff because they were established team members, and he was very much coming through on the fringes. And then he ends up playing left back for a season and is outstanding there. He'd obviously started as a DM and then eventually makes his way to centre half, and just completely established himself really. And very much, Houlier's the manager I think he loves the most, but under Benitez just made him, loves a solid defence, loves organisation, loves guys who'll throw the body on the line, and he was that. The old people talk about the big man, little man centre forward thing. It's the old Quinn and Phillips, archetype. Whereas the centre half one is always, you've got your big commanding centre half, and then you've got your scrapper, the one who's blocking stuff with the nut sacks on the line and all that. And Carragher was that. And Istanbul, you mentioned it, he goes down with, he blocks a shot and he goes down with cramp, and then he gets treatment, and then he gets hauled back up again, and the ball comes in and he stretches again and he does it again and he's down immediately afterwards. And it was like that advert of it was from a year or two ago, was the goalie, and the ball keeps hitting him and he gets up and it's just hitting him in the head and he's falling down. It was just forever classed as a hero just for his undying airing spirit towards stopping footballs going in goals, which is great. Yeah,
and you want your soldiers, don't you, as well? You can imagine that exact same clip just being slowed down to slow-mo with sort of dramatic music and smoke put on a filter in front of it, and it's just it's like he's in the Battle of the Somme just taking hits. Oh, I get it, I understand it. There's are you okay with him? I guess, maybe this is an awkward one for you, but the punditry side of players, I think it takes a shine off them. Was it the fact that you've got the Istanbul memory there for you? Does that kind of get you away from it, from losing that? So someone like Paul Scholes, I'm kind of I idolise him as a player, but then he can't stop moaning, so it becomes quite difficult. Do you know what I mean?
Paul Scholes is also a charisma vacuum, isn't he? Which doesn't help.
Which is not a fair comparison with Carragher, who's actually, he's gone into punditry and done very well, right?
Yeah, I felt a bit awkward for him at first, but he's the way he does it. So what's interesting now is that you can talk to Jamie Carragher about his football career, and it's interesting. But the most interesting chats I've had with him have been about punditry. He loves punditry as much as if not more than his playing career. So like we were having he put his book out last year or so, 2 years ago probably now, and it was about the greatest games and analysing them and all this kind of stuff. And I just talked to him about punditry and what goes into it. He did a podcast on me and Chris's Machin podcast again a couple of years ago. Fascinating. He's a student of the game, which is what I love about Carragher. He's the lad who had Serie A recorded on a Sky Plus box back in the day. So he'd get in on a Sunday night, having finished the match, and he'd watch whatever the Serie A game was, and he'd watch the La Liga game. And there were other footballers who I know around Liverpool at that time, because I was working in bars and stuff, who were out on the piss. And Carragher was safely tucked up with a cup of Ovaltine, learning more about the game. I think the punditry stuff suits him. And I quite like the fact that he hasn't lost that edge. So, the battles between him and Gary Neville, I think, are absolutely fascinating, because I think Gary Neville wants to be treated as a bit more highbrow, and Carragher won't allow it, which I just think is brilliant. Yeah,
the amount of times Gary Neville goes, if you let me finish, it's amazing. That's your back line. We're moving to midfield, 3 in midfield, and you've got some cracking names here. Let's go with your DM. Who's your DM?
I have gone with Zabi Alonso, which is funny in some regards, because I actually think his best work kind of happened away from Liverpool. If we're being honest, he's remembered more fondly at Liverpool than he actually, in hindsight, that I think he actually was appreciated at the time. He had a great first season for us coming in. We had no idea who he was, no concept of what this lad was. It was just, I don't know, back in the day when transfers just used to happen, and you'd read it in the paper like a day late. It's like, we've signed these 2 Spanish lads, great. Wonder if they're good. And then you'd watch them and go, these are okay, aren't they? He had a year or so. There's some injury problems. He wasn't great. And then he had a famous sort of falling out with Rafa Benitez, who famously wanted Gareth Barry for the side, which is funny how the trajectory of their careers sort of went, of course. But he ends up doing one more season for us, I think 2008, 2009, and he's stellar in that season. And then, of course, goes on to Real Madrid and then Bayern Munich as well, wins everything in the process. Yeah. Just for a lad with zero pace, he never got caught in possession ever, because his game intelligence, his ability to take a first-time pass and give himself the yard he needed is just, I've never quite seen a footballer like it. Yeah,
so he arrived with that other player that he wrote, Luis Garcia, very different players to come. Both did pretty well. But I think the interesting thing with him is that although, obviously brilliant in Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, there's this very, very strong love for him from Liverpool fans. And that's probably because he was he was more important, wasn't it? That midfield 3, it was at a time where you're sort of scrabbling to try and go, look, we can win Premier League titles, we could do all these things. But I think deep down, and again in hindsight, you knew that you were sort of 3 or 4 players away from it, in terms of the players that are too good, and you only kind of know that, I think, once you've gone and done it. Like I weirdly have a perspective on it with QPR, because when we go down the divisions or up the divisions, you can get that feeling of like, oh, I know we need 6 or 7 players who are a bit too good for this level to get yourselves out of it. And I think it goes all the way up to the top, and even more so nowadays. So Alonso was a player that was kind of helping elevate you as a team a little bit. And I think that's a big thing with Alonso and players of his kind, but probably him specifically. I reckon the players that played with him absolutely loved playing with him. Like the players that want to just go and score goals, the Steven Gerrards of this world. A player that can just give you the ball quickly is worth its weight in gold. And he was so good at that. And I love players without pace. It's huge. It's huge for me. It's a joy.
He was just absolutely unreal. Again, just so gifted with the football. There's just something just incredibly silky about watching someone who just takes that first touch and he knows where the ball's going, and being like pleasantly surprised by what they're able to deliver. There's so many plodders in football who just moving on and they get it back and blah, blah, blah. When you consider there was a time when he'd have been at Real Madrid and like, I know Busquets is more than this, but, he was very much like the guy who just the foundations, who does move it quickly. And when you play tiki-taka football, you need someone who just does it. But Zabi Alonso was an artist. And yeah, there was something, just genuinely. And there was that point as well, to your point, we had a song about having the best midfield in the world. There was a point with Gerrard and Mascherano and Alonso, and we had Sissoko for a brief period around that. He was that real couple of seasons where he was outstanding. And then obviously Lucas Leiva comes in a bit after that. It just, we had a wealth of talent around that time, and Zabi was phenomenal. Yeah.
Interesting as well, just to say quickly, 143 games for you guys, 15 goals. Real Madrid, 158 games, 4 goals. And Bayern Munich, 79 games. So he did, he played a lot of games for Liverpool. I think that kind of maybe gets forgotten a little bit. Elsewhere...
he takes the penalty in the Champions League final as well, and misses it and then scores on the follow-up.
Thank goodness. Imagine, I think, would he have made it in this team if you'd lost 3-2? He'd not scored that penalty? I don't know. We don't need to talk about that. It doesn't matter. He did score. Elsewhere in midfield, they're in the same team together, so let's talk about these two players together, because I guess that's probably part of it. But obviously had a long career for you. I mean, probably first name in your dream team, is it? Was he first name?
100%.
He was.
Yeah. I mean, there's no world where you're not being a Liverpool fan from Liverpool and not having Steven Gerrard in your side. Yeah. I might as well just give it up, and pack up. I don't think I'd be allowed on the internet or in Anfield ever again.
That's beyond churlish, isn't it? That's so. Imagine. Yeah. No, I just thought Lucas Leiva did a better job for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is, and it's a shame almost that a career that ends up being, if his career had ended 10 years earlier, before the internet was quite as horrible a place. He'd have gotten away with falling over against Chelsea and people wouldn't have really thought about it. But for it to happen in the banter era means there's a bunch of people. I stop at service stations driving around the country, and people in like KFC go, "Oh,
don't
slipped," and you're like, "The fuck are you talking about?" You know what I mean? No, the best footballer Liverpool have ever had. In my career. Yeah, there's one more player who I think it comes close to challenging that, who's in my team a little bit later on, in terms of pure talent. But he was everything. The Roy of the Rovers of it all, of having a lad come, a local lad come into the team, break onto the scene. He was all action, all energy. He was this like crunching DM in the early days of his career, just tearing into people and with his skinhead and getting sent off all the time, and it was great. And then he matured into this just more culture player, and then he had that spell with Torres up front, where they just dovetailed exceptionally. He had a spell playing right midfield. He had those weird
right-sided forward at one point, wasn't he?
He played everywhere, and of course Istanbul, the header to kick it all off. And just be out of this world. Talent, drive, match winning, scrapbook, match of the day moments. The perfect. And look, when you've got some of the best players in the world who talk about him, and again, actually, fully being ex midfielder, referring to him as pound for pound, I think at the time the best centre midfielder on the planet. Around that sort of 2004 to 2009 sort of period, there was no one better than him. He's Steven Gerrard, amazing. Yeah, you got the Gerrard final, of course, as well. Where were you? Were you there? I was not. I was managing a pub. I had the worst day of my life that day. I had the big screen on. I did not booked enough staff in, the owners. So it was me and one girl working behind this bar that was about 6 deep. There's like 200 people and 2 people serving. And funnily enough, my good old friend Chris Pajak, who was watching it from somewhere, rang the pub payphone that I had to then go and answer. And he was like, "Hey, you coming to watch the match?" Hey. But of course, I then lost who I was serving. I was raging. I there was a problem in the cellar. A barrel of Guinness exploded. So I was mopping up Guinness in the cellar when Liverpool scored their first goal in that game. I think.
Right.
Nightmare. Yeah, horrible day that if we'd lost would not have been well remembered. But as it was, I got to watch it after the fact.
I think, I mean, watching Gerrard, so again, look, we're speaking about Alonso there. I think people forget as well, he won that penalty for that as well, and what I think when I think of Gerrard and what puts Gerrard above a lot of these players for me when I had debates about Lampard or whatever you want to do, it's the dragging. Like, I think the players that drag the team through moments, Istanbul, I mean, the Gerrard final against West Ham in the FA Cup, and just generally a lot of games where it's just screamer after screamer, goal after goal, and you don't really see many players like him right now. You really don't. A guy who is all action. Like, I'm struggling to let me know in the comments. I'd love to know modern players who are all action. I think you wonder, you hope that someone like Bellingham could maybe go and be that player. I don't know if he's got the technical, striking of the ball that Gerrard has. Who knows? But there are very, very few players like this. And the thing I always go to with Gerrard is, if you had 11 Gerrards, I think it beats any team of one player. Like Ruud, we had this debate a few times, but I think it was Ruud Gullit was one where, again, he could play centre back, he could play right back, he could play up top, he could play all those things. I think Gerrard's is right up there, and I think you're struggling to think of a better name. So for a complete player, he was absolutely outrageous. Final midfielder, and not a Liverpool player. What a moment this is. There is one more. So we've got one in kind of each area, haven't we? We've got one more up front. So who is your final midfielder? Left-sided centre midfielder.
Very much the sign of my age. Zinedine Zidane. Just like he's my favourite non-Liverpool player of all time. I think, and maybe non-goalkeeper, I guess. But it's just that for that age and that time growing up, and you coming up through the 90s and through watching Gazette of Football on the weekend and seeing Juventus and seeing Zidane. It was the Zidane and Nedved and that kind of era, Juventus Pirlo and what have you, and then going to France '98 and being ready for him to just burst onto the scene and then getting sent off, and then and then having to come back, and then from then on just absolutely he's just. They made that film about him, didn't they, where they just watched him for the full 90 minutes.
Oh, it's so good.
But it made you a bit sad that if they'd just done that 5 years earlier, you'd have seen him at the actual peak of his powers and whatever. But there was just something so iconic, tall, rangy, he didn't look like he should be the kind of player who played in those positions and had the skill set that he did. He had the close control of you normally get those short, squat players. I mean, the kind of the messy stuff, or the Ribéry's or your Robins, where you're small and you're tricky. He had that, but he was also 6 foot and powerful, and and strode through the middle of the pitch. And that Galacticos Real Madrid team was I'm an unabashed sort of glory hunter when it comes to other teams around that time. I just used to like watching the best teams. So Real Madrid, it was just, they were a cheat code at that point, but they had this mad unbalanced formation where you had McManaman in there, and you had the fit Raul in, and you've got Carlos coming up the outside, and whether it be Morientes or then Ronaldo and Ruud van Nistelrooy later on, and Michael Owen very briefly, just Zidane, that he's it. There's a giant print in our office and studios that I made of Zidane that's always up somewhere, because he's just, if I could have the talent of any footballer ever, it'd be him without a doubt. Yeah,
just so graceful, and that if anyone hasn't seen that documentary, it's nothing happens really. I mean, I think he gets sent. Does he get sent off? He might get sent off in it. I might be wrong in that. But basically the thing that you can't, and I don't know why I love it so much, is they keep showing his feet, and he's got this little tap thing. He all the way around. He's almost like he's just keeping his sort of glove, so when you pull your gloves up a bit, maybe as a wicket keeper, it's like doing the same with his foot. It's like a strangely mesmeric. He's a stunning player. It's fascinating, the sort of the little nasty thread in him as well. Had a little bit of a temper with him. The sort of a very silent guy as well. Like you didn't really, you didn't hear much from him, which again kind of adds to the mystique, I think, as well, which is interesting. Yeah, good shout.
And there's that the Leverkusen volley, the technique of that dropping over and the strike on that is just, it's obscene. It's obscene. I could watch that goal all day long, forever. And that like spell, that Real Madrid kit where it had like the A-team style numbering on the back and all that. It was just, that's like the zenith for me.
Yeah. You got that kit, you must have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, yeah. Right, we're on to our strikers now. And again, the one player isn't Liverpool, two are. Let's finish off with a Liverpool player. So let's go with I want to go with your left wing forward or left-sided attacker first. Let's know who it is.
It is Luis Suarez. The only man is the man I was referring to a little earlier, but probably the only more talented footballer than Steven Gerrard. We have debates in and around Liverpool. I mean, even my dad, right, who adores Kenny Dalglish. Like for him, like Kenny Dalglish can do no wrong. Greatest football he's ever seen. Is absolute idol. But even my dad will admit that Suarez was a better footballer. Like, and Suarez broke something in me. In a good way.
Well, that's a great line.
Anyone who watches my channel and knows that I have this weird habit of like laughing or giggling when Liverpool score like a good or important goal.
Yeah,
I didn't do that until Suarez.
Oh really?
Like I didn't. I don't know what. I can't even tell you what.
I know exactly the sound.
But it's honestly, it's like Marv from Home Alone 2 when he gets electrocuted.
So when did he break that in you? Can you remember the game?
Well, no, that's the saying. I couldn't tell you the exact moment, but it was just, there's just moments when he picked the ball up and you're like, well, he's going nowhere here. And then he nutmegged someone and he was round them. And then he'd be bending an outside of the boot finish round the goalkeeper into the bottom end, or, he was just picking it up. Like they got his Norwich games where he just, he's scoring from 40-odd yards, lobbing the goal. There was nothing he couldn't do. And I still go back and watch his highlights sometimes, particularly that sort of 13-14 season where he broke the goal scoring record. I've never seen anything like it. He was the third best player on the planet at that time, and I don't think. And we talked about this about how you class and quantify. Obviously, it was undoubtedly Messi and Ronaldo, and I'm not getting sucked into any debates other than it being in that order. And then it was Suarez. It was Suarez underneath them for me. And then he goes on to Barcelona and he scores even more goals. And he's still going now at Atletico. I've never seen a player quite like that burning desire. Like if you knocked on his door at 6:30 on a Saturday morning with a football under your arm, he'd give you the game just out of principle. Yeah. And he'd batter you.
Yeah.
and he would snap you, and he would claw at you and do everything he could to beat you in any form of game, which obviously led to his issues. But yeah, and obviously some of those bits and pieces do tarnish it a bit, but for the pure enjoyment that he gave me as a fan, nothing like that. And
in terms of like pure quality as well, again, it's interesting. I never kind of think about it until we talk about these things. You have these little moments in your head. Again, he was at his best at Liverpool, I think. And the reason I probably say that is because, the numbers might... I mean, I don't know if the numbers compare or not, but again, in terms of being someone who's kind of just above it feels like someone's above everyone else, and they know that, and they have the obligation to do that. When you're at Barcelona, you've got Neymar and Busquets and Xavi and... all these players. Did I say Messi? Oh, surely I did. All those players, right? So when Suarez is there at Liverpool, and I saw it when Rangers were in the Premier League, I think we somehow beat you. But I remember the first half going, oh no, he's way too good. Like I was thinking, oh, he's going to be tough. But then you watch him in front of you, and he's playing in fast forward. It's scary. You're literally scared of what he's could do to you, because you've seen what he's done to Norwich and the like. Very, very frightening player. And you've got another similar kind of player to him up here, but again, sometimes different strikers have different skills, but in terms of being a very complete forward, he really, especially at Liverpool, he was just outrageous.
He was, you're right. At Barcelona, the thing about it shows how good he was, that he wasn't just another piece in the puzzle in Barcelona. He elevated Barcelona. He made Barcelona even more formidable. They'd had that for ages, where there was a constant cycle of Eto'o held it down for a while, but they tried. Saviola, I think, was tried there briefly, and they tried.
Ibrahimovic was in there.
Yeah, exactly, and Suarez just came in and was able to be deferential in some ways, but you get the impression with Messi sometimes a bit like it must be hard. And Gerrard had this for Liverpool, when you're looking around at the players around you, and there's a hierarchy of I'm the best player, obviously. Everyone needs to be up to my standards. Suarez's standards are higher than anyone else's. He trains like he plays. Just 110% all time. So he went in there and actually, I think, made Barcelona a better side, who were already one of the best sides on the planet. So
that's it. Yeah, he never had to go and get his plate. It was always on the plate was given to him at Barcelona. Sometimes he had to go and get his own plate sometimes for Liverpool. Yeah. That's how I'd put it. Right, your second to last pick, right-sided forward, another player who played for Barcelona.
Again, it goes back to that Zenith sort of period of football for me, where Ronaldinho, it was him and Zidane, and I just had a slight more leaning towards Real at the time, which put Zidane above him. But weirdly for Ronaldinho, there's a couple of things that stand out, because back in the day when you didn't watch every game, and you could, of course, in the 2000s, La Liga was on telly, so you could watch most of those games if you really wanted to. But it was that time where there was still an aura around not seeing them all the time, but actually getting to see a little bit more of them. And that there was that period before he was totally lost the plot and went on the ale, where he was I think there was a picture of him without his shirt on, and he was just ripped, and he looked like he'd been bred in a lab to play football. He looked thoroughbred, he was and I know there's some very equine looks about him as well, but he had that champion racehorse quality to him, where he just looked faster and better equipped to play the game than anyone else around them. And there was obviously you got that great sort of wave in the foot moment against Chelsea, which you then went off and tried to practice yourself and could never generate the power. Impossible. There was the Brazil advert with the flicker flacker thing where you knock at one wing,
flip flap,
I've never actually been able to manipulate my body to do that in any sort of reasonable way. I equated it to a bit there's a bit in The Simpsons where Homer has a memory of his night before, and it's the dancing around, and it's got scene missing, and then it cuts to the end, and it's Ronaldinho was a bit like that. It's I understand what's happening, and then he performed some sort of voodoo, and he'd be away with the ball, and my brain wasn't capable of registering what it was I'd seen, because I'd not seen it before. But the one of the real reasons why he stands out, and I always talk about this, maybe I don't know if I've ever said it in the past, but there's a line from him that stuck with me, and he said, when he was at Barcelona, he said, "I am now the man I dreamt of being as a little boy," and I just thought that was beautiful. If you're gonna lead your life and live your life by some sort of code, it's that when you get to be an adult, be what you wanted to be when you were a kid and you weren't worried about all the sort of realities of life. I just thought that was amazing.
That is amazing. Do you know what's interesting? There's who was it? It was this is a weird segue, but Tyson Fury was chatting to Gary Neville recently, and he was referring to what Robbie Williams said was paradise. What was it? The paradise kind of disease or theory or syndrome, where you kind of reach this, you become the man you dreamed of as a boy, and then you're just okay, just the stomach for it's not kind of there to be Ronaldo and be out, outrageous and intense and wanting to be able to do it again and again and again and again and again and again. Ronaldinho, I think that was what was interesting, was that, like, I look at his numbers here, and it's almost not worth the breath of it. But like Barcelona, 145 games and 70 goals, which is fine, in comparison to normal numbers now. And if we're going to, again, in the banter era, if we're arguing about all these things, then fine. And the drop-off from him was, it was interesting how heavy it kind of was, because he became okay very quickly from being like an alien. So I wonder if that's part of it. But that's, again, that kind of feeds into like what you kind of like about these players. There's some players you've got to sometimes go, let's just put all those numbers to the side. Let's remember the highlight reels and the artistry. And he was, again, like what you're saying, in terms of players who, they do something and then you figure it out. Like that's what the game's about. And I think sometimes I fear that we're losing that a little bit because players are so well coached.
Yeah, and that, and also to what you kind of, I think you're kind of saying prior to that, is that burning brightly but shortly thing. Is that, we're now in the era of like Ronaldo 37 and still banging in. Dead boring. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sure Man United fans don't agree, but there's something really boring about that where, I mean, I'm sure it's exciting in its individual moments and seeing great football. Great footballers are great footballers, and there is an admiration. But like, I find Zlatan Ibrahimovic to be one of the biggest bores on planet Earth because of that. Like great longevity. But I prefer my longevity in the shape of like James Milner, if I'm being honest. If you're going to be long, be someone who boots people in the air. Like, but the Ronaldinho thing, he just clearly just loved the ale and loved partying, and had this spell where he got to be the best on the planet for a bit, and then just decided to have a laugh with his life, but also without it being tragic like some of the ones from the 70s and 80s who did similar things. People remember Gaza supremely fondly, whereas, I mean, a handful of seasons at best where he was really the player that everyone thought was the
very true
powers. But he's remembered more fondly for it.
And yeah, you can get in the way of that, can't you, sometimes? Because you're like, you go, he had a great season at Rangers. Like, that league is not, it's not these other leagues if we want to go down that road. But sometimes that's not important. Let's finish off your team. And what I'm going to do is, Liverpool fans will be watching this right now. Here's a test for you. I want you to pause the video and write down in the comments below who this player is. I'm going to give you a clue. The clue is that his middle name is Bernard. If you're a real Liverpool fan, you'll know who this player is. So pause the video. Let me know if you get it right or not. And we'll find out now. Who is your final pick from your dream team, Paul?
Again, there could only be one choice for me. And I'll be honest, we talk about Gerrard being the first name on the team sheet. It was actually Robbie Fowler. Because if we're talking dream team, like I could have put Torres in there because I had such a good time for a few years with Torres. That he was unreal, and he was just so beautiful and silky and all those things. But he just wasn't there long enough. And Robbie Fowler, in terms of like who I grew up with, that period of like 93, 94, when he really started to break in for Liverpool. So I'd have been 10 going 11, and that's the year I think where, and some people come to it sooner, certainly they do now, but the end of junior school is normally that point where you really get onto football and you're collecting the stick. The 93-94 sticker book, Premier League sticker book, was the first one I ever completed. So I knew every player in the league. I knew every player in world football. That was the time when football video games were starting to become better and better. There was like Sensible World of Soccer. FIFA had only just come out around that point. And then and you've got this local lad who he was the first player that felt like mine. So Ian Rush was my first football hero, but then I was 6 when I got my first shirt. I was like, it was indoctrinated more than like I chose that sort of way. I had number 9, and I loved Ian Rush, and I loved John Barnes, but I didn't really know about them. I didn't really, understand them or know their story or their history or what they meant or how Liverpool played. I just knew they won loads of stuff and they were really good. When Fowler came in, he was it. Like, if you were a Liverpool fan in the city of Liverpool, Robbie Fowler was the thing. He was the one. He was the player you wanted to see. You wanted his name on the back of your shirt. You wanted to know that he'd scored the goals at the weekend. And it wasn't just like, we've had plenty of like local lads who you really hope are good because you just want them to be. But like, there's a case to be made that he might be the best finisher Liverpool have ever had. Like in terms of just pure striking ability. I adore him, and I've had the privilege of interviewing him a few times and spending a bit of time with him, and I really struggled not to freak out.
Yeah.
Because he means that much to me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess the Ian Rush thing, Ian Rush as a young person at the time, I was like, what is that? Because he's got like a moustache, and I'm like, I hadn't really seen that much, and it was a bit confusing. Whereas Robbie Fowler, I imagine, would arrive and you go, oh, okay, I get it. He looks like one of my mates. Like, well, probably not, but you know what I mean. He was so sort of young, and he was those first few years. I think it's the same with a few of these, and I guess it's something I should think about when I'm doing dream teams in the future. Is that I think there's also like, in terms of burning bright, when you're picking these players, it's almost like a season that you want to kind of go to with each of these players that you could pick for them. And Robbie Fowler, it would be those early years, wouldn't it? That sort of 93, 94 season in particular, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
He's unbelievable. I just look at his caps for England. I always thought, I was like, why is Robbie Fowler never in I couldn't get my head around it. There was just so many England strikers at the time. You had Ian Wright, Les Ferdinand, Shearer, Sheringham, Chris Sutton, if you want to chuck him in there, Matt Letizia, Dion Dublin, Andy Cole, and 26 games, 7 goals is a travesty, to be honest, for someone.
Yeah.
And again, someone who is a shame, just a couple of injuries, just same with him and so many players, that it cost him a little bit, because the numbers that he would have got would have been outrageous, because his finishing was unbelievable. He didn't have that turn of pace, did he, after a while?
Yeah, that was the thing. That was the thing that he lost, and he was never lightning, but he was quick. He was quick over it. He was quick enough to get away from a man, which he lost. And his close control and his vision and his all-round football and ability. I mean, I had to refamiliarise myself with it, but like 94 to 97, all comps, 31 goals, 36 goals, 31 goals. That was, you just don't get forwards like that even now, even in the supreme era of Messi's and Ronaldo's and Salah's and Aguero's and all that kind of stuff. He was special. He was something else. My favourite, I've got 2 outstanding Fowler goals, but the one that really, really always sticks with me, we played Aston Villa, and the ball gets played to him on the halfway line, and he Cruyff turns, I think it's Steve Staunton on the halfway line, and leaves him for dead and just bursts forward, and then he slams this shot, and it sort of bends away into the far corner. Like, just... never really seen anything like him. And then he had his injury problems, and then Michael Owen burst onto the scene and stole the heart of the nation, and it was never quite right for him. And I think he sort of admitted he kind of struggled a little bit with that as well, about how you transition away from being that the upcoming talent where everyone's like, give him a break because he's and gives him all the support to be, and he's got to be the main man when he couldn't physically do it as well. One of my favourite moments in football, because there's 2 Fowler eras, obviously. There's the breakthrough era, and then there's the return when Benitez brought him back in 2006. He was just... I was so deliriously happy with that, because he was clearly on the way down.
Yeah.
But like... just getting to see him come back. It was such a football manager moment, that you pick up. We've all done that, where we've bought a player on their name just to have them in the squad, and you don't really maybe get a tune out of them, or maybe you get one goal off the bench and you think they do it for you all the time. Chris Pajak talks about this with Andy Carroll in his Cardiff side. I think he scored 1 goal for him, and he's got this in his head that he's like a super sub. But Fowler had those moments. He come in, scored a few more goals, got to say goodbye, got to wear the 9 shirt one more time, got to say goodbye in the right way. Yeah. And really sort of round his Liverpool career off. Just my favourite Liverpool player of all time, Robbie Fowler.
Amazing. Lethal. Yeah, the lethal player for a couple of seasons. Right, final question. I always ask it in the moment, and I think this might be an easy one. Who's the manager of your dream team?
Look, it could have been Rafa Benitez. but he's tarnished that by joining Everton.
How could he?
No, it's Jurgen Klopp. It has to be. Like I've been fortunate enough. I was trying to work this out the other day. I think the only living Liverpool manager I haven't interviewed is Graham Souness, so he's the only one I don't have a personal measure of. But he carries with him a lot of stigmas from his time as the Liverpool manager. It didn't really go well, and of course I coming into football having to hear a lot of negative stories around him, and Liverpool being a bit crap didn't help that. Houllier was great. Rafa was my manager, like the manager I was totally bought into, like my late teens into early 20s, Istanbul, FA Cup and all that kind of stuff. But Jurgen, Jesus, like he's like I love him as a man, like and I've got a weird relationship with him where he seems to like me as well, which is very like mad. Like it's
I'm confused.
Mad, James.
I'm confused.
No, I know. You know me, and you don't like me, James. And that's rightly so. Like no. He's great. He's obviously a brilliant manager. He's a brilliant fella, and like it's for Liverpool. For me, a manager's more than just a guy who puts the players out and does some fist bumps on the touchline occasionally. It's that thing of like the cultural fit. You know, we're the fan base that had like this gold gilded picture frame of Rafa Benitez that used to get taken round places and stuff because we deified the managers. And Jurgen Klopp's managed to be that, and yet you never get a sense that he's above you, or you feel as though we put him on a pedestal and he's climbing down and we're pushing him back up there. And he's going, no, seriously, I have no interest in being. We're like, no, just won the league after 30 years. Get on the pedestal, yeah. And he's like, no, can I come down and have a drink with you instead? You're like, oh, go on. I had a bevy with him a year or so ago, just before the pandemic. And it was me and my wife for an award ceremony, and he was up for manager of the year, and he came over and had a drink with us, and amazing. Like my wife gave him a kiss on the cheek, and he described it as in a night where he'd won the manager of the year award as the highlight of his night was, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's just fucking stupid, but it's like, that's what he is. He's just a genuinely lovely, charming, charismatic, brilliant fella with all the right morals, and he happens to be a brilliant football manager because, you know, that helps. Yeah,
well, yeah, all of the above, isn't it? I think it's like that. You know, the man management is, you know, he's the best. He is the best when it comes to man management. There's no doubt about it. How he energizes people, fans, you know, entire football clubs. It's amazing. Yeah, of course you had to pick him. Paul, thank you, mate. So I loved it. We always had to get you on here. I'm intrigued by your team. It's good. It's really, really nice to go through it. And you're happy with it. There's no little tweaks that you'd want to make, because it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, as I say, it's tough. It's very tough not to have like honourable mentions to Jordan Henderson, who I absolutely adore as a man and as a footballer as well. Obviously, we've just done the documentary series on him over the summer, so like we've had some real great insight into him, and I feel kind of privileged to have had the access to his life that few have had previously. So he was definitely in strong consideration in that regard, and then maybe him for Alonso, maybe. Maybe I did fall down a little bit on the side of I want people in the comments to see what a good side, and Jordan Henderson still does polarise opinions in that regard. But yeah, he's probably the only one I would really like to maybe have.
To crow about it. It's tough. Well. It's so tough. Paul, legend, thanks so much, mate. Lovely to chat to you again. Guys, if you haven't checked out Redmen TV, make sure you do. Make sure you check out Machin TV as well. And make sure you check out the other episodes of Dream Teams. Let us know what you think about Paul's team down below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed it. Hit the like button as well. And I'll see you next time.